I forgot to put on underwear for my business flight. I kicked off my shoes and flopped down on the couch, sighing. As usual, dropping Lisa off at the airport for her business trip was a bit of a hassle. The traffic was a nightmare, she was running late, and she was complaining about everything. I was happy to finally be home and have a strong cup of coffee to perk me up after that stressful start to the day. I sat back down on the couch and opened my laptop to check my emails and relax for a bit before dinner. While I was looking through my emails, I saw one from my boss. I saw an email from Lisa's boss that caught my attention. The subject line alone made me think, what's this about? I opened the email, my face scrunching up in confusion and disgust. I had a queasy feeling in my stomach as I read the message from Jay. Hey there. Just wanted to give you a heads up about your flight today. Wear your underwear under your skirt, leave your underwear at home for me, and make sure you bring that sheer black bra I got you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the hotel room later for our business meetings. I quickly closed the laptop. I felt uneasy. I was pretty shocked by what I just read. My wife and her boss were having an affair without my knowledge. I felt a surge of anger and pain as the reality of the situation hit me. I took a few deep breaths to calm down. Okay, maybe it was just a joke. I tried to think it was just a sick joke or a spam email, but something told me that wasn't the case. I needed to look into this further, so I opened Lisa's email account and started searching through her sent messages. That's when I found it, a folder labeled personal. I clicked on it, and I knew I was right. There were dozens, maybe even hundreds, of messages between Lisa and Jay. The messages were explicit, detailing their affair, when and where they'd meet up for sex, and even some raunchy and nude photos. It was all laid out in front of me in no uncertain terms. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to take in the full implications of my wife's betrayal. I look forward to seeing you later. I'll be wearing the diamond earrings as a small token to remind you of how much I appreciate you. I'll see you at the Hyatt at 3 p.m. I've got that black Prada purse you wanted waiting in the room. I kept hitting the print button, and the messages just kept coming out of the printer. Each one was like a harsh slap in the face. The harsh reality was becoming more and more undeniable. By the time the printer ran out of ink, I was surrounded by a sea of crumpled papers. I was looking at a paper trail that proved my wife was unfaithful, and it was pretty damning. I grabbed a cold one and took a long sip, hoping for a moment of relief. The bitter drink didn't help, so I slumped back on the couch. The TV was on in the background, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. I took another look at the emails. I was so angry, I couldn't even think straight. How could she do this to me and us after everything we'd been through together? She just threw it all away for that guy. Jay and his money? It was obvious that he was a very wealthy man. I had a few beers to try to calm down and think things through. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had it all wrong about the woman I loved. The sharp ring of my phone cut through the tension. I saw Lisa's smiling face on the screen. I was tempted to reject the call, but then I thought better of it. I didn't think she should know yet, not until I'd looked into it. Those eyes of hers were pretty deceptive. Hey, I misspoke. I accepted the call on the second attempt, putting on a casual tone as she went on and on about her awful flight and the hotel mix-up. I tuned out, feeling fresh waves of nausea crashing over me. I was looking at her contact photo and I saw. I didn't say much, just let her talk as I tried to process my emotions. We can sort this out in person when we meet next. I was looking at the spreadsheet on my computer screen, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. The numbers and formulas were a bit jumbled. Normally, I find this pretty straightforward. It was mindless work. It was a typical day at the office, but today was different. Not after Kevin. Hey, how are you doing? I looked up from my work to find Dave, one of the accounts guys, giving me a concerned look. How long had I been zoning out? Yes, I'm fine. I told a little white lie, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. I didn't get much sleep last night. I was preoccupied with thoughts of Lisa and Jay having sex. Dave wasn't totally convinced, but he dropped it and went back to his cubicle. I took a deep breath and rubbed my hands over my face. I needed to get my act together and focus. On top of everything else, throwing away my career would make this nightmare worse. No matter how I tried to concentrate, the details from those emails kept flashing through my mind like some twisted porn film in 4K. I couldn't stop thinking about them together, his hands all over her body, the body I used to admire. My hand clenched involuntarily as I crumpled the stack of printed emails I had brought from home. The paper cut into my palm, and I finally came back to reality with a sharp sting of pain. The clock hit 5 o'clock, so I left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. I tried calling Lisa's hotel room a few times, but it just kept ringing unanswered. On the drive home, I kept my foot on the gas pedal. When I got home, I saw her car was in the driveway. She had to make her grand re-entry. I killed the engine and took a few calming breaths. I had a stack of emails in my hand, and I was holding them tightly. I thought, here we go. I marched inside and shut the door behind me. I found Lisa in the kitchen, enjoying a glass of white wine. Hey, take it easy. I didn't let her finish throwing the emails across the room, so they fluttered around her like a strange, infidelity-related snowstorm. Her face went pale as she read through them. The truth was out there, plain as day. I can explain. I went over to Lisa and said, I took a step towards her, my voice rising a little. Explain? How long have you been sleeping with your boss? Were you just going to keep lying and cheating forever? She didn't even try to deny it. Her gaze fell in shame. It's not like JD can provide the kind of lifestyle you're used to. I deserved to hear the shrill ring of her phone. I interrupted her. Jay's name appeared on the screen. Naturally, he was already calling to check in on his little side project. No need to respond. I said it in a way that was clearly annoyed. In fact, there's no need to worry about any of it. Just leave. Just step out for a moment. She looked taken aback, like she couldn't fully grasp what I was saying, but I was being completely serious. The Lisa I loved is no longer here. I might as well make it official. She opened her mouth as if to argue or plead, but then seemed to change her mind. Just then, her dad arrived, having been given a heads-up by her. They worked in silence. Lisa was packing up her clothes and personal items as if it were just another move. An hour later, she was gone, taking her betrayal and my broken heart with her. I found myself standing in the aftermath of my broken home. The rest of the night was a bit of a blur. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, because I woke up suddenly, blinking in the bright morning light. My mouth was really dry, and my head was pounding. I looked for something to drink. I grabbed the closest bottle, not caring what it was. The harsh taste of whiskey hit my senses, but I swallowed it down, desperate for any respite from the anguish squeezing my heart. That's how I spent the next 2 days, isolated and stuck in my own private purgatory, binging on booze and self-loathing. I was trying to process Lisa's betrayal, and it was really making me angry. I was also feeling pretty confused and unsure of what to do. I'm not sure how I got through to Monday morning, but I somehow managed to drag myself into the office and sit at my desk. I had a thermos of black sludge, which I slowly drank, trying to get my life back on track. Then I got an email from Lisa's lawyer. It was a cold, clinical breakdown of our marriage. She'd calculated it down to ugly numbers and assets, according to the meticulously detailed spreadsheet. She'd drained our joint accounts, taking her fair share and then some. I let out a dry laugh as I looked over the settlement terms. Fair share? She got a lot more than that. The greedy one. It didn't really matter either way. I would have given her every last penny if it meant I didn't have to go through this. I took a deep breath and started checking the boxes, signing away the house, the cars, the retirement funds. What was the point of fighting it? I was lucky to be able to move on from her for good over the next few weeks. I got rid of every last trace of Lisa from my life, our wedding photos, the nicknames, her toothbrush and robe, the lingerie she used to wear for me. I gathered everything together into one big pile of boxes, effectively erasing her mark on my home for good. I'll never forget the day her brother Michael stopped by. He had a serious look on his face. We used to be pretty close, but that seemed like ancient history now. I had an idea this was going to be tough to hear. He started avoiding eye contact, but Lisa didn't. She told me she regretted leaving me for Jay. I clenched my jaw. I felt a fresh stab of pain. At least she had some conscience, I thought, as I tried to make sense of what she'd said. She said you were just her first husband. Michael carried on, his words clearly showing how angry he was. It was like a blossoming in my chest, but it was quickly smothered by the sadness that always lingered beneath the surface. I wanted to scream, cry, or even hit a wall, but I just didn't have the energy. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I know she really loved you at one point, didn't she? I interrupted him, holding up a hand to stop his rambling. I can't keep reopening old wounds. Michael seemed to shrink a little, nodding in understanding. I'm really sorry this happened to you, Kevin. You didn't deserve any of this. I suddenly felt like I was 1,000 years old. I just want to move on and start fresh. I want to find some happiness again. We exchanged pleasantries and ended up in an awkward silent hug. Two grown men trying to come to terms with the harsh realities of life. As Michael turned to leave, I called out one last thing. Hey Mike, thanks for telling me. I suppose it was a bit of a tough conversation, but he mustered up a sad smile and patted me on the shoulder. Just don't let this happen. Hey, how are you doing? I was in the grocery store, checking out the beer aisle as usual, when I heard a familiar voice. It was Kevin Johnson. Is that you? I turned to see a friendly face that made me think of something important. It was Sarah Mitchell. She gave me a warm smile and gave me a little playful shove. He remembered me. I hadn't seen him since high school. I finished up for her with a nod. She looked mostly the same, a little older and wiser around the eyes, but still had that same sunny vibe she always had. It's pretty incredible, don't you think? After all these years, we ended up running into each other here. She did a little spin, gesturing around the grocery store like it was the fanciest club in town. I couldn't help but smile. Her positive energy helped lift my spirits after a rough patch. It really puts a spring in your step, doesn't it? She gave me a playful tap on the arm. There was that classic Johnson sarcasm, but I thought it was funny. It's a big improvement on the haunted look you had going on a second ago. My smile faltered a bit as I remembered my current situation. I'm going through a separation and am soon to be divorced. Sarah must have noticed the change in my mood. Her expression softened. You know, Emily Thompson actually asked about you not too long ago. She was trying to find her mom's old yearbook to see if she had your info in it. Emily Thompson. The name brought to mind a faint recollection. She was a cute girl with freckles and braces who I had a crush on back in the day. We weren't exactly close, but we're close friends, but you know, you're still the one I'm talking about. Do you think you could get her number for me? I caught myself asking. Sarah gave me a quizzical look, but didn't ask any questions. I just pulled out my phone, just to check. I suppose I just did it. She gave me the number, which I quickly wrote down. I'm not really sure what made me do that. I had a moment, but I felt something. Maybe it was a glimmer of hope. Thanks, Sarah. It was great to see you again. She gave me a hug that felt maternal, like she knew I needed it more than I could admit. You too, Kevin. She leaned back and held me by the shoulders, so I had to look her in the eye. Her gaze was genuine. Whatever you're going through, it'll get easier. I promise. I just nodded, not knowing what to say. She gave my arm one last reassuring squeeze, then went back into the crowd of shoppers. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car outside that I finally got the nerve to call the number Sarah had given me. Hello, the voice on the other end said. It was warm and slightly familiar, but there was something more mature about it. Ah, hi, Emily. This is Kevin Johnson, your high school classmate. There was a brief pause before she responded. Kevin, it's great to hear from you. I'm amazed to see you here. How did you manage to track me down? I just ran into an old colleague at the grocery store. She said you were looking for me. I was actually trying to track down my mom's old yearbook for my daughter, Rachel. She's been really into looking at all the vintage pictures lately. I see. I replied, my voice trailing off. She's my daughter. Naturally, she would have children of her own by now. We weren't the same reckless high schoolers anymore. It was great to hear from you, Kevin, after all this time. Let's get together for coffee sometime and catch up. I started making excuses about being too busy, but I was actually trying to politely decline. But something made me think twice. You know, coffee sounds great. Actually, how about we get together for dinner instead? I'd love to meet Rachel too, if that's okay with you. There was another brief pause on the line, but Emily quickly recovered. Yes, dinner would be great. Just a quick heads up, though, just a heads up, Rachel can be a bit of a handful. Sometimes, I'm sure I can manage it. I replied with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. How about tomorrow night? We arranged to meet at a family restaurant in the city center. Emily texted me the address as I put my phone away and started the car. I got a strange feeling in my chest. Was it hope, excitement, or something else? I hadn't felt anything even remotely like that since, well, before a little voice in the back of my head tried to caution me about getting my hopes up about not being ready to move on yet, but I brushed it off. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this was the first step towards things finally getting easier. I'd never know unless I gave it a shot the next evening. I pulled into the restaurant parking lot and took a few deep breaths to calm my nerves. I can do this. It was just a relaxed dinner with old colleagues. Emily was already seated at a booth towards the back, with a girl with glasses and pigtails, who I assumed was Rachel. Rachel, this is Kevin. This is Rachel, Kevin. She gave me a warm smile and an awkward hug. Kevin, it's great to see you again. You haven't changed a bit. I'm Kevin, your mom's old friend. She nodded shyly, taking me in one more time. Emily just laughed and ruffled her daughter's hair affectionately. Don't worry about her. She's just being cautious around new people. I'm sure we'll have her smiling and chatting up a storm before you know it. I sat down in the booth across from them. The booth across from them suddenly felt like home. It was like an everyday family dinner between people who'd known each other for years. As the waitress came over to take my drink order, I saw Emily looking at me across the table. She gave me a little wink and mouthed, "It'll be okay." It was like I could finally relax. Maybe there was still a little hope left for me after all. As the week went on, things started to blur together as I slowly adjusted to my new normal, or at least as normal as things could be now. The house was quieter and lonelier, but also calmer and more peaceful in its own way. I'd be willing to accept it. I've been spending my evenings catching up on some old books I'd never had time for before. It's been a good way to keep my mind occupied and off other things. Some nights I've been meeting up with a few colleagues from the office to catch a game or grab drinks. It's been a start towards reclaiming some semblance of a social life. It was during one of these nights that those low-key happy hours were when Dave dropped the bombshell. Turns out Lisa's boss had a bit too much to drink and crashed his BMW into a tree after leaving a club. The reports said he died instantly on impact. "Oh, Dion, you'll never believe this," Dave went on, in a low, conspiratorial tone, as if he were reporting vital gossip. "Lisa was with him. She's still in the ICU, and she's in pretty rough shape." The others in the group immediately looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I just stared down at my drink, trying to make sense of this latest surprise. Part of me felt a bit vindicated. I felt a sense of justice, knowing he'd finally gotten what was coming to him. But I also felt a bit down, knowing Lisa was fighting for her life. I was still trying to make sense of these emotions when my phone rang. It was Lisa's parents on the phone. I heard voices on the phone, sounding worried and asking me to come to the hospital. I didn't owe them anything, but I went anyway, unsure if it was out of some sense of duty or just curiosity. The Lisa I saw in that cold, sterile hospital room was almost unrecognizable. She was under sedation and had bandages on her face. She was connected to tubes, and her face, which had been so lively before, was a battered mess when she finally came to. Her eyes opened wide with panic and confusion. "Kevin," she grabbed her good hand and gestured towards me, "where were you? Why didn't you come sooner?" I opened my mouth to respond and remind her of the harsh reality. But I couldn't get the words out. She seemed lost and afraid, like a scared little girl, not the heartless woman who had really hurt me. "I'm here now," I heard myself say. "Let me take your hand." "I'm here for you," as I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, Lee. I'm here for you." She seemed to relax at that. Her eyes fluttered closed. Once more, as she fell asleep, I stood there for a long time, my eyes brimming with tears. When I finally got home that night, I was pretty emotional. My head and heart were all over the place, and I was at a loss as to what to think or feel. So I did what I thought was best. I knew the only thing to do was to give Emily a call. "Kevin, everything okay?" I took a deep breath, suddenly feeling the need to see her. She represented hope and new beginnings, not this tangle of pain and unresolved trauma. "Can you meet me for dinner again tonight?" There was a brief pause, but she didn't hesitate. She took a moment, but she didn't hesitate. As expected, it was the same place as before. I don't know what I was expecting when I arrived at the restaurant, but it certainly wasn't the warm welcome and reassuring smile Emily had waiting for me. She didn't pry or ask any awkward questions. She just let me get on with it. Rachel was her usual self. She was a little shy but full of energy, and she seemed to sense my gloomy mood. She showed me her latest drawings and told me about her favorite books. By the end of the night, I was actually smiling and laughing along with them. It was like a glimpse into an alternate reality, where I was just an ordinary guy enjoying a simple family dinner, without any lingering doubts about betrayal. I stopped myself before I got too carried away with that train of thought. I was really enjoying myself, getting lost in the warmth and lightness of Emily and Rachel's company. We stayed for dessert until the restaurant staff had to remind us they were closing up for the night. I walked them out to their car, gave Rachel a high five, and said we'd go to the zoo together soon. "Thanks, for tonight," I said to Emily, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. "I really needed this, of course." She replied with ease, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "What are friends for?" Friends. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with possibilities and the promise of something more. Before I could dwell on that line of thought too much, Emily gave me one last hug and showed me back to my car with a playful wave. I watched them drive off, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Maybe this was my chance to finally move on and start fresh, finding happiness again with people who had my best interests at heart. I was still smiling to myself as I pulled into my driveway, already making tentative plans for the zoo trip with Rachel. But as soon as I got home, I was disappointed to see Lisa's parents sitting on my couch in silence. She'd been in a bad way for days. Her husband was there with her, supporting her. Kevin began, his voice hoarse with fatigue and sorrow. "We need to have a chat about Lisa." I felt like I'd been thrown into an ice bath. The fragile sense of hope I'd been nurturing suddenly came crashing down. I started to speak up to object. I told them I was done with this. I couldn't keep going through this endless cycle of trauma. But her mother interrupted me. Her eyes were fixed on me, filled with desperation. She said Lisa didn't remember anything. She didn't remember the accident. She didn't remember the affair. She didn't remember the divorce. It's all just disappeared. I was at a loss for words. To process what they were saying, Lisa had amnesia. She didn't remember betraying me in the most brutal way imaginable. The doctors say it's called retrograde amnesia. Her father went on, his voice a little strained. She's lost all memories from the past year and a half or so. As far as she's concerned, you two are still married, and I got this cold, hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. Naturally, this occurred just as I was finally starting to put my life back together. "We know this is a lot to ask," her mother said, reaching out to grasp my hand imploringly. "But please, Kevin, you have to help." "I can't help her remember." I pulled away from her touch as if it were a branding iron. I shook my head. "No, I can't. I can't go through that again, not after everything that's happened." She pleaded, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "You're the only one who can reach her and help her find her way." "I'm sorry," I said, turning away from their expressions of distress. "I'm really sorry, but I just can't do it." I didn't wait around to see if they had anything to say. I quickly left the room and went upstairs to my bedroom. I fell onto the bed, catching my breath as I tried to make sense of the conflicting feelings inside me. My heart was torn. How could I turn my back on Lisa, the woman I had loved with all my heart and promised to love and protect forever? But then, how could I get back into the thick of it after she had broken me so utterly? I'm not sure how long I lay there, torn between guilt and self-preservation. I was trying to salvage what we had, but eventually, I heard the front door open and close. It seemed like my parents had given up and left. I got up from the couch and went downstairs. I felt like I was made of lead. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Emily and Rachel were sitting on my couch with matching expectant smiles. Emily gave me a warm hug. She seemed totally unaware of my inner turmoil. We were hoping to take you up on that zoo trip today, but we wanted to check in and see if you were still interested. I blinked at them for a moment before managing a faint smile. They just seemed to radiate such simple joy and light. The zoo sounds like a great idea. I was elbow-deep in dishwater, trying to focus on the task of cleaning the stack of plates and bowls. Anything to block out the constant stream of thoughts and memories racing through my mind. My thoughts were all over the place when I heard my phone ring loudly in the quiet kitchen. I immediately tensed up, water sloshing over the sides of the sink as I hurried to wipe my soapy hands and check the ID. It was Lisa's dad, as I expected. I took the call with a sigh. "Hello, Kevin," he said in a gruff voice that was heavy with fatigue and resignation. "I know I'm probably not the first person you want to hear from right now, but Lisa. He wants to see you to talk." I pinched the bridge of my nose and closed my eyes as I tried to find the words or, more importantly, muster up the energy to let him down gently yet again. "Look, I understand you're in a difficult situation." I tried to keep my tone even, but we've already talked about this. I just can't go through that again, especially after everything that happened. There was a long silence at the other end of the line, and I thought he'd hung up, but then he spoke again. His voice was smaller and defeated as he said, "Just come see her, Kevin. I'm really sorry, but I'm begging you." She trailed off, as if she was struggling to keep her emotions in check. "I'm afraid she's not doing well. The amnesia. She's feeling guilty about what she can't remember. It's really affecting her." I felt a tightening in my chest at the raw pain that was evident in his words. No matter how much Lisa had hurt me, she didn't deserve to go through that. To be stuck in a living nightmare. It was like being stuck in purgatory, with just the fragments of a life she couldn't reclaim. I said it before I had a chance to think it through. "I'll stop by tomorrow after work, but I can't guarantee anything." He let out a sigh of relief, which was all the confirmation I needed that I'd made the right call. "Thanks, son. You have no idea what this means to me." I ended the call and leaned back against the kitchen counter, feeling a bit stunned. What was I thinking? The next evening, I drove to the hospital, which I knew well. My stomach was in knots. I kept reminding myself that I was just doing this as a favor to her parents. I didn't owe Lisa anything after what she'd put me through. But as soon as I stepped into that cold, sterile hospital room, I knew I was in for a rough ride. Lisa looked small, fragile, and vulnerable, moving slowly and absently in her hospital gown. At first, Lisa didn't seem to notice me at all, even when I cleared my throat. "Lisa, it's Kevin," I said. Her head turned toward me, and her eyes widened in a mixture of shock and hope. I recognized that look all too well from those final, agonizing days of our marriage. She reached out to me, her slender fingers trembling. "You did," she said. I quickly crossed the room and took her hand in mine, despite my initial reservations. I could feel her heart beating fast against my hand. She was shaking, but her skin was cool to the touch. She had a surprisingly strong grip as she clung to me. "I'm here. I'm right here," she said, looking up at me with those big, soulful eyes. I fell for those eyes years ago, but there was a haunted, lost quality to them now that broke my heart all over again. "I'm really sorry," she said quietly, her eyes filling with tears. Her cheeks were flushed, and I could tell she was trying not to cry. I knew I had to say something, but I was a bit tongue-tied. This was the Lisa I knew, the woman I had devoted half my life to, not the stranger who had betrayed me. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and said something, but I don't remember what. We sat there for a while, just her quiet sobs. The only sound in the tense silence was eventually her quiet sobs as she met my gaze. She wiped her eyes. "I don't want to remember," she said in a small, childlike voice. "I'm worried about what I'll find out about myself. I'm afraid of what I did to you. I'm afraid of what my heart might do. I'm afraid of what I've done to myself." I wish I could just be honest with her. I wish I could tell her the truth about. The harsh reality was that she needed to process it, heal, and move on. But something stopped me. Maybe it was for the best. I heard myself saying, maybe we can start over, wipe the slate clean, and begin again. Her eyes widened at the sight of that new hope lighting up her face. "You'd be willing to give us another chance after everything that's happened?" I started to reply, but then I stopped myself. I was going to fill her in on what happened with Emily, Rachel, and my new lease on life. But then I really took a good look at her. She was a vulnerable, damaged woman before me. I just couldn't go through with it. I couldn't be the one to ruin her world all over again. "I'm not sure." I finally managed to force a tight smile. "Why don't we take it one day at a time?" I put forth a suggestion. "Okay, no need to rush anything." She seemed to relax at that, and a hint of a smile appeared on her lips. She gave a little nod and tugged at her lips, saying, "Okay, let's do this one day at a time. I can work with that." We got back to a more comfortable silence after that. Her hand was still loosely holding mine. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, at least partly. I knew that I was only postponing the inevitable by not ending things. I had to admit that another part of me, the part that still loved her no matter how deeply she'd hurt me, wanted to save her this fleeting moment to pretend just for a little while longer that we were still the golden couple I had believed us to be once upon a time. As I eventually got up to leave, Lisa grabbed my arm, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and worry. "Hope and trepidation. Kevin, would you like to grab dinner sometime? You know, when I'm feeling better, just us on a date." My heart was racing as I looked at her. It was open and vulnerable, like the Lisa I had fallen for, trying to break through the barriers of her memory like a wildflower, determinately. I wanted to go back to how things were and get that spark back, but I knew I couldn't. Not after everything that's happened. Not with Emily waiting for me, ready to show me what real, healthy love looks like. Lee, I started speaking in a gentler tone. I think it would be a mistake. You and I had our chance, and it was pretty amazing. Her brow furrowed in confusion, and her mouth opened to protest, but I pressed on before I could lose my nerve. That was then, and this is now. I've moved on and found someone new who makes me really happy. Dawn seemed to be getting it, but then she looked sad again. I wanted to take the pain away, but we both knew that wasn't possible. She said quietly, "I see," and let her hand fall away from my arm. "Well, I'm happy for you," she said. To be honest, the truth was pretty clear, but I just couldn't bring myself to tell her. I gave her one last look, then turned and headed for the door. I was trying to hold it together, but I just couldn't. "Kevin," she called, stopping me in my tracks. I glanced back, hoping I'd see a brave smile, but all I saw was a sad, trembling smile. "I'll always have a soft spot for you, no matter what. Thanks for giving me another chance, even if it was just for a little while." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Then I was out the door, back into the harsh fluorescent glare of the hospital hallway, and the reality of my life now. I was breathing in short, uneven gasps. By the time I got to the parking lot, I realized what I'd done. I'd been so close to falling back into old habits after putting in so much effort to stay on track. Epilogue. The cool autumn air carried the soft sound of laughter as I adjusted my tie and took one last look in the mirror. Today was the day of the fresh start, which I never could have imagined wanting just a few years ago. "You ready for this, boss?" I turned to find Rachel smiling up at me. She looked really grown up in her puffy lavender dress. Her unruly curls had been styled into an elegant updo, making her warm brown eyes seem even bigger and brighter than usual. "Kiddo," I replied with a wink, trying to ignore the jumble of nerves fluttering in my stomach. "Shouldn't I be asking you that? This is a pretty big day for both of us." She rolled her eyes dramatically, acting like a sassy preteen. "Oh, come on. I'm more relaxed about this than you are. Let's get going." We couldn't keep her waiting any longer. My mom was waiting at her own wedding with one last steadying breath. I followed Rachel out of the room and into the flower-filled courtyard where the ceremony was taking place. There were already clusters of loved ones seated chatting and laughing as the band played a song by JY in the background. I immediately spotted Emily at the front. She looked absolutely radiant in her elegant white gown. She caught my eye and gave me a warm, loving smile that reached all the way to her sparkling eyes. This was what true happiness felt like. The ceremony itself was a bit of a blur. Rachel gave me a wink as she made her way down the aisle as the flower girl. Emily's smile as we exchanged vows and rings, and the enthusiastic cheers and applause as we were finally pronounced husband and wife. I couldn't help but notice the sad look on Lisa's mother's face as she watched us share our first kiss as a married couple. She and Lisa's father had made the journey to attend, despite the situation being pretty complicated. Lisa was in the hospital and unable to handle it. I tried not to think about it too much and decided not to let anything ruin this perfect day as the night went on and the drinks kept flowing. I couldn't help but look at my new wife, still in disbelief. That this was my reality now. Just a few years ago, I had been a broken man, certain I would never experience joy like this again. But Emily, not God, just Emily, was the light at the end of that long, dark tunnel. She showed me how to find peace, laughter, and love again. She gave me the courage to move on from the past. Once the last few diehard guests had left in the early hours of the morning, I picked Emily up and carried her over the threshold of our new home. We laughed together, filling the silence. "I really appreciate all your help, Mrs. Johnson," I said, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. She gave me a long, passionate kiss and said, "I love you." That night, as we made our way through the dimly lit space together, I felt a deep sense of resolution within me. A piece of my soul that had been broken was slowly starting to heal. Over the next 2 years, our little family continued to grow and thrive. We also had a son, Michael, and a daughter, Lily, after Emily's late mother. I even had the courage to officially adopt Rachel, making her my daughter in every sense of the word. Those years were some of the happiest and most fulfilling of my life. Every morning, I'd wake up in our cozy home and just smile, listening to the sounds of my beautiful wife and kids. I was getting ready for their days, just pottering around. Simple moments like making pancakes with the kids or teaching Michael how to throw a baseball in the backyard. Moments I had once thought were lost forever. Then one crisp October evening, my phone rang. It was Lisa's father, Kevin. He sounded like he was in a lot of pain, like he was struggling to get the words out. "It's Lisa. I'm sorry to have to tell you that she's gone." The world seemed to stop as he delivered the news in a chilling tone. "Lisa, my Lisa, has passed away." Even after everything that's happened, after all the trauma and heartache, it felt like I was being squeezed of the last bit of air from my lungs. I was trying to make sense of this latest, cruel twist of fate, the complications from her injuries. He spoke the words slowly and clearly, as if they were a burden he was forced to carry, the amnesia. It was a long road with lots of ups and downs. It all became too much in the end. She just passed away. I was overwhelmed with emotion as memories flooded back. I remember Lisa's bright smile on our wedding day. I remember her nose crinkling when she laughed at my jokes. We were just perfect for each other. At last, 2 pieces of the puzzle are complete. I was overwhelmed with grief. I thought I'd already dealt with and moved on from this, but this was a whole new level of mourning for the brilliant life she should have lived. It felt like she'd been denied a second chance. I felt like I'd died without ever truly understanding the extent of my mistakes or the depth of the love I'd once had for her. The next few days and weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements and somber gatherings, each one taking a little more of a toll on me. I tried to stay strong for Emily and the kids, but I knew she could see the pain I was struggling with. "You know, you can talk to me if you want to." One night, as we lay together in the dark, she asked about Lisa and about how I was feeling. I pulled her closer, enjoying the comforting scent. I ran my fingers through her hair as I tried to find the words to say. How could I even begin to describe the jumble of emotions currently squeezing my heart? I finally responded, my voice barely audible. I told her I'd get through it. "It's a lot to take in." She hummed an understanding, her fingers tracing soothing patterns across my back. "Take all the time you need, my friend. I'm not going anywhere."